start. So today we're talking about stress, our adrenals, and sleep and why they're so important. When it comes to stress, it's incredibly important to manage our stress because if we don't, it can really start to affect our health. More than 80% of our health issues are stress related. So a lot of times you probably even notice if you're stressed out, your stomach starts to get into knots and feel, icky, maybe you have bowel issues, or you can't think, or you're extra tired, or if you can't sleep, your brain just won't work. So everything starts with making sure that we can manage our stress as best as possible. That way we're not causing more effects and harm to ourselves down the road. So when it comes to stress, we have a lot of different factors in the body that regulate this. So we have what's called the nervous system. That is our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is the run from a bear, fight or flight. You probably remember that from like high school biology, where if we are living in 2019, which we are, we're going to be in the sympathetic dominant state all the time of just deadlines and traffic and terrible things you're hearing on the news. And our bodies get into the state where they start to feel really frantic. A lot of anxiety starts to develop. We have these thoughts that we can't really control. Maybe it's even hard to fall asleep. So we want to get out of the sympathetic nervous system. Of course, we can't go 100% out of it or we would die, but we can start to shift more towards the parasympathetic where actual healing occurs. So the parasympathetic is the rest and digest. I like to joke and say, think of this as laying on a beach in a hammock with a mojito in your hand. That is the parasympathetic, where you just feel like, wow, everything is right in the world. I'm calm, I'm safe. And if we can get our bodies into that for, even 30 minutes a day, whether it's through reading or journaling or meditating or going for a nice walk or laying by the pool, something like that will help us to heal much faster because that is, again, the state where our bodies will heal. It's not the running from a bear, driving in traffic. It's the laying and relaxing. And as we work on our stress and our perceptions of stress, our bodies will naturally shift out of that sympathetic dominance and more into the parasympathetic just by itself. But at first, just like everything else, we have to practice it. And something that I have found to personally help myself through a lot of the stress that will happen throughout the day is, again, changing my perception. So I use this example because my cousin is amazing, but very anxious. And she thinks that everything is bad before she even knows the truth about it. And so what I told her was, okay, say you're walking in New York City down an alley and you see this guy trying to get into a car with a coat hanger, right? And you're like, oh my God, this guy is trying to break into the car. And I might have even shared this with you guys on one of the other calls, but he's trying to break into the car. He must be a bad guy. I've got to run and call the cops. You can imagine in that moment of seeing a guy trying to get into a car that your heart is probably racing. Maybe you're a little short of breath. You're ready to run. And again, that's not sympathetic. What if instead you changed your perception? Instead of that being the first gut reaction, instead you think, oh my gosh, that poor guy, he's locked out of his car, right? Haven't we all locked our keys in the car at some point? Or people that have. I'm notorious for doing that. So what if he locked his keys in the car and he's frantically trying to get in because his wife just called and she's gone into labor? That's a very different response on our body where now we have empathy. We see that he's in this really bad spot. We know that he's really struggling. Maybe we can ask him if he needs help. Now, in reality, if you're walking down New York City and you see this happening, don't go up to him. But it's just a way of showing that, everything in life can be multiple ways, just depending on the way that we look at it. You could probably think of an instance too where someone was like, hey, can we talk after work? And you instantly think that you did something wrong, you're going to be fired, they're mad at you, when really they just want to talk to you and they're just like, hey, you've been doing a great job. I think you deserve a promotion, right? It could go either way. So instead, change your perception, right? Come back into reality of what is happening in the present moment and just focus on that, right? There's even a story about this woman who I got to meet briefly, and she wrote this book called, I think it's something Courage. I'll have to look and I'll let you know. But she talks about how she was about to swim some really big feat. I don't know what she was swimming, but something big. And she was standing on the dock getting ready to jump into the water. And she was freaking out because she's like, oh my God, the water's gonna be so cold. What if my muscles seize up? What if I can't do this? What if I die? What if I blah, blah, blah? We're all familiar with the what ifs, right? And instead, she told herself, all that's happening right now in reality is I'm standing on a dock waiting to go in the water. And when she changed that perception and she focused on the now, that was able to help her to get over that anxiety and focus, which cleared her mind to allow her to complete this huge swim. And now it's one of her proudest moments. So again, change your perception, try to find the silver lining, try to focus on the present, because a lot of times we are stressing ourselves out over nothing. And we do this a lot with our friends too. So-and-so is not talking to me because blah, 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 or they're mad at me because, but they're so wrong. But really none of that happened. They were just really busy and they just hadn't reached out for you a while, or they forgot to respond to your text. So again, change that perception, start to decrease your stress, as that is something that you will just practice over and over again, until eventually it is just completely second nature to you. Any questions on that before I go into any special techniques for when you really are having that freak out moment, or something really big is going on? Any questions? No? Perfect. And then again, I do have you guys muted, so if you do have a question, just raise your hand and I can unmute you. In terms of different stress management techniques, there are so many. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to look at your handouts yet, but in there I mentioned some of my favorite techniques. One that has saved me a bunch of times, as well as gotten people in my office who were, 13 out of 10 stress level, hysterically crying, the world is crumbling around them. We do EFT, or tapping, so emotional freedom technique. And within minutes, they go from hysterically crying to a level 2 out of 10 stress, and they're like, I could take a nap. Right? So you'll see that I put a handout there, as well as a link to a video on YouTube to teach you how to do it. But it is super simple. If you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious or depressed, or you're going through something with a boyfriend or a friend, just take a second, put your feet on the ground, find a nice comfy chair, and you're going to tap on these different acupuncture points and repeat a mantra that works for you. You'll see in the handout, you can do this super long, complex, script, or my way is just the simple of, even though I'm anxious, I love and accept myself completely. Even though I'm anxious, I love and accept myself completely. Even though I'm anxious, I love and accept myself completely. And keep doing that along all the points. So the karate chop point, right between your eyebrows, right outside your eyes, right under your eyes, under your nose, under your lip, under your collarbone, on your rib cage, and on top of your head. And keep repeating that until eventually you're like, and you take that big deep breath and you're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. So just a couple rounds of that will do you wonders. I have had people in our in-person program tell me that it was worth every penny of the program just to learn that one tool. So don't forget about that. When something big happens, you're hysterically crying, you think the world's crumbling, this will take you from here to here in a matter of minutes. Another really great way to reduce your stress would be things like just breathing, abdominal breathing, where you start to breathe with your hand on your stomach. And as you breathe in, you feel your stomach rise. And as you breathe out, you feel your stomach fall. Right? Instead, because as humans, we are stressed, and again, in that sympathetic dominant state all the time, so we breathe from our chest. Right? If you even pay attention to how you breathe, you're probably just breathing right here. But if you were to actually stop and watch a baby breathe, they breathe from their belly. But somewhere along the line, we get stressed out and we stop breathing with our stomachs and really expanding our diaphragms, and we start doing this shallow breathing that tells our bodies that we're in danger. So breathe from the belly. It will train your nervous system to be nice and calm. Eventually your body will again switch over to breathing more from your belly. But you can even consciously start to do this by at stop signs or at a red light, right? You're sitting there, you're not doing anything anyway. Do 10 deep abdominal breaths. Right, or however many it takes to get past that stop sign or the red light. But again, that will help to bring you into the parasympathetic, as will things like meditation. A lot of people are worried about meditation or kind of talk themselves out of it because they think it's something that only like monks can do, or yogis and things like that. But it is super simple, even for, luckily we are in 2019 and we have apps for everything. There are amazing apps for meditation. I really like one that's called Calm, and it's free. You can even use it from your desktop, so it's calm.com from your desktop, but Calm is really great because they have meditations that are 2 minutes long, 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long, 30 minutes long. So figure out, what amount of time you have to set aside, put in some headphones, and just breathe, do those abdominal breaths, and just listen. It is totally normal when you meditate, especially when you're starting, to have those thoughts come in and you're like, okay, I gotta refocus, right? Just think of it as clouds passing by. Let those thoughts pass, get back centered, just go back to breathing, and just keep doing that. Same thing. Eventually your body will stop drifting and your brain will finally focus, and you'll be able to just sit there and meditate and keep your brain clear for the majority of it. But it's super powerful. I've had days where I was really stressed and I would get a little tension headache, and I could tell that my neck muscles were super tight and there felt like there was like a vice around my head. And I literally was at a coffee shop studying, and I put my head down, put my earphones in, I put on the app, I did 2 minutes of breathing and meditation. By the time I brought my head up, my headache was gone 85% or more, right? So it can make a huge difference in a short amount of time just by taking time to get oxygen to your brain, breathing, and meditating. Have you guys tried any of those or journaling? What do you guys currently do for stress? I'll let Nicole and Stephanie go first. Anything?
I do the breathing.
Good.
Like laying down or wherever I'm sitting, I just take a few, like a minute or two to just like abdominal breathe. But I do want to try that EFT thing.
It's awesome. It's really, really good. I've had like grieving mothers do it with great success. You can use it for anything. How about you? Do you do any kind of stress stuff?
I've been trying to meditate. I use the Headspace app.
Perfect. Cool.
That's what I usually do.
Awesome. I love that. And again, there's so many apps. Calm is just the first one that I had heard of, and I really like it. But you can even do things too where they have like that blossom where it like starts as a small dot and then it kind of increases, and you can breathe with that with your breath, and that's really helpful. And that's kind of more of like a biofeedback trick, but those are really good too. So tons of free stuff on the internet. How about you, Liz? What do you do for stress?
I do yoga. So yoga is my thing that I do. I also do journal. So mostly those two things.
Perfect. Love that.
I mean, I've been walking a lot, and that's like my time by myself. So I've been looking forward to that every day too, just to
clear your head,
get out and do my own thing. Yeah.
Perfect. Love that.
And it's outside, so it's like you're in nature too, which
yes,
I think is super helpful.
Absolutely. And they have so many studies now showing too that nature deprivation is a huge reason why we're also anxious and so tired. And they've even seen like prisoners are more aggressive when they're not in nature because they're confined to, cement walls. And so they've actually, in different countries, not ours, I don't think, but they put even big pictures of like a forest in the cell, and they see their aggression drop. So making sure that, just like Liz was saying, get outside, walk around, breathe in the fresh air, or as fresh as Arizona air can be, and really make sure that you're taking that time to be in nature. But definitely try those techniques. I think you'll really like them. Let's briefly talk about the adrenals, which are super affected by stress. Our adrenals are these little glands on top of our kidneys that put out our adrenaline hormones, our cortisol, as well as a couple other hormones, and are super important for our well-being. So if you are stressed all the time, I like to think of it as, if I were to ask you to hold out a cup of water for 5 minutes, could you do it? Maybe for the first 3 minutes, and then probably not, right? You'd probably drop it. Depends on how heavy the glass is, right? But you'd probably drop it. Same with our stress levels. It's like, I think I can manage this level of stress. I'll be okay, but eventually you're going to drop that glass and you're no longer able to handle stress anymore. You'll lose that resiliency. So a lot of times, especially women, we take on way too much and we don't know how to say no. And I think I might have talked with you guys about this before too, but learn to say no, right? Respect yourselves enough that if there's something that is put on your plate that you don't think that you're the best for, say no. An example, I was asked to be the vice president of a networking group that I'm in. And whereas a couple of years ago, I would have said yes out of just obligation and wanting to help the group, I said no, and I followed it with, because I don't want to let the group down. I'm too busy right now. I have too much on my plate. I want to make sure that the person who is the VP is going to be putting their all into this group. I don't feel that I can do that right now, right? So it's very different than just saying no. It's no, I don't want to let you down, or no, right now is not a great time for me, maybe later. So learn creative ways to say no and respect yourself enough to not put even more on your schedule if you're already overextended, because your adrenals can't handle an infinite amount of stress, right? We need to make sure that we are doing our self-care, our stress reduction techniques, so that we don't burn out our adrenals, because once our adrenals are burnt out, it takes longer to rebuild them. And I want to say that some of you on this call have probably already experienced some adrenal fatigue, where you're starting to put on weight, you can't get it off as easily, you're exhausted all the time, you get a little bit of brain fog. When I know my adrenals are taxed is if I'm like doing laundry and my boyfriend comes around the corner and I jump to the ceiling because he startles me, when realistically he's not a mouse. Like, I kind of heard him, but I still got startled, right? Like, if you're that easily startled, that's a good indicator. And so you want to make sure that, again, taking care of yourself so that we can rebuild the adrenals by reducing our stress. Some simple supplements. You can even do, as I believe Alyssa mentioned on one of the calls, some licorice tea. That licorice tea is a really good herb for your adrenals to help them to rebuild themselves. That way you have plenty of energy throughout the day and you're feeling really good and not as easily startled or bothered by things. Like, if you notice someone says something and you like snap at them, that can usually be an adrenal fatigue. Whereas once your adrenals start to recover and you're not as tired and you're sleeping better, you get to this point where you're like, okay, that kind of bothered me, but let me think about my response. And then you respond instead of just reacting. And so you'll find that you're just becoming much more tolerant of things as well. So kind of just give you an idea of like too much cortisol. So if you're in the current stage of holding the glass, you're going to feel anxious, maybe panic attacks, overwhelmed, easily irritated, not sleeping great because your mind won't turn off, versus once you drop that glass or you're somewhere on the way to that, your sleep starts to be disturbed, or you're on the opposite end where it's like you can't get out of bed at all. You're just like, I'm done, leave me here. I'm going to watch Grey's Anatomy for 10 hours. You can even have panic attacks in that state too, because again, as I mentioned with like the startle response, you're so easily like triggered because you have no resiliency that you panic over little things too. So again, as we get those adrenals back into good health with our food and our lifestyle and saying no, you will find that you'll start to have more energy, more mental clarity, and more desire to even do things like work out, which is why I haven't even talked to you about exercise routines yet, other than the baby steps of like going for walks, things like that. Because until you're starting to feel better, for the majority of people, they're not going to be able to stick to an exercise routine yet because their adrenals are just like, let me sleep, right? Although things like going for walks will help your adrenals to recover, but we don't want to do intense things like CrossFit when your adrenals are unhappy. Other things that hurt your adrenals too are like things like coffee, stimulants, right? Where we're kind of forcing your body to have more energy than it wants to have. And this kind of goes back to the whole idea too of not saying no, right? Again, we think that we can do everything, or we want to push through the fatigue so we drink more coffee, when really the fatigue is there as a signal for us to slow down. So instead of ignoring that signal, either allow yourself to rest for a second or go for a walk instead of just jumping to the coffee. We haven't eliminated coffee yet, but we will in a couple weeks. So in preparation, if you're someone who drinks a lot of coffee, start to wean it down. So if you're used to like 3 cups a day, this week start to go to 2 cups a day. And then next week go to 1 cup a day. So by the time we get to week 4, we can pull out that coffee and not panic. I want to say that 99% of our patients who actually give up the coffee say they feel better without the coffee. And a lot of that is because your adrenals can finally restore themselves because they're not just pumping out more cortisol in response to the demand that the caffeine gives it. You can also read this really great book on the adrenals, since I can only touch the tip of the iceberg in this 40-minute call. But there's a great book called The Adrenal Reset Diet. And I found that to be really helpful with our patients who are super depleted and they are just like way adrenally fatigued. And they've done things like keto and blah, 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 and they feel worse. If you actually add in carbs later in your day for someone who's really adrenally fatigued, like maybe a little bit of rice or a little bit more sweet potatoes, people will tend to say that they sleep better because their cortisol will actually come down from those carbs. So carbs are not bad. They are our friends. We just want to make sure that you're eating the good carbs. So instead of like pasta and bread and things like that, eating some sweet potatoes or a little bit of rice will help to give you a little bit more of that energy boost throughout the day, because it allowed you to sleep better at night. So very little carb for breakfast, a little bit more carb for lunch, but not too much, because you've probably noticed if you eat a big meal with a lot of rice, you're exhausted afterwards. And then at dinner, more rice or sweet potatoes so that you can actually go into sleep. So, for example, with that, like breakfast, you could do, for people who are eating more meat and animal products, like eggs and bacon and a bunch of veggies, or like a protein shake with a bunch of veggies in it, or like a breakfast taco, but keeping the carbs almost non-existent other than veggies. Lunch, some grass-fed ground beef or chicken and a bunch of veggies, and maybe some sweet potatoes. And then for dinner, maybe like a taco bowl or something where you have some rice, and if we're doing more plant-based, like some beans, some nuts, maybe some avocado, things like that, but you have that higher carb. For more plant-based, we could add in for breakfast, like you could still do the oatmeal, or maybe just do like a shake with some pea-based protein. I know I sent you some links there, Liz. Pea-based proteins, or leftovers or something like that. Then lunch, sweet potatoes, avocados, cucumbers, little beans, things like that. And then again, dinner, like we just talked about, you could do more of like a bowl with rice and things like that. And you'll start to notice that you actually will feel better. One of my biggest issues with keto for the majority of people is that because it's so low carb and carbs are like non-existent, people's adrenals crash on that, as do their thyroids. Our bodies do need some carbs. They just need the right carbs. There are also really great herbs for the adrenals. You can use, like I mentioned, licorice. You can use ashwagandha, and you can get all these in like the health food store. And these will help your cortisol response during the day, because you're supposed to have higher cortisol in the morning. And as the day goes on and it starts to get a little bit darker out, your cortisol comes down. And the opposite is true with your melatonin. It starts really low and comes up as it gets darker, so it's higher at night. So that ashwagandha and the licorice will help to establish that nice curve in the morning if you're drinking it instead of your coffee in the morning, or like in the afternoon if you get a little fatigue. Those are really good options for you. And then in terms of sleeping to repair our adrenals, we want to make sure that we're getting, 8 hours a night. Before I go too much into that, any questions on that very, brief explanation of our adrenals and what they do and how to keep them healthy? Oh, perfect. Anybody on here have any sleep issues? So you girls do. Tell me a little bit about what it is with sleep. Is it the falling asleep or the staying asleep?
Staying asleep.
Staying asleep?
Mine is both.
Both. So if we're not sleeping properly, and there are multiple reasons, we're not going to feel great during the day. I noticed both of you yawning and things like that too, so you probably didn't get great sleep last night. Having that consistent sleep schedule is really important. So kind of our adrenals love routine. So if you're going to bed one night at 11 o'clock, you go to bed another night at 1, and another night at 10, your body doesn't know when to get tired. So if instead you start to make it that every night you go to bed at, let's say, 10 or 10:30, then your body will get used to being tired by then, and you'll fall asleep easier. You'll also fall asleep easier if your room is completely blacked out. So we talk about sleep hygiene, and you'll see a lot of information in your portals about that. But sleep hygiene is when you're having, blackout curtains or an eye mask to keep your room really dark. That way your melatonin stays high, because melatonin is our hormone that is going to trigger our brains to get tired. right? So if your brain is exposed to the white lights and the overhead lights and our cell phones and TVs, all that bright light is telling our body, put out more cortisol and drop your melatonin. So if you're having a hard time falling asleep, I highly recommend that on your smartphone, if you have an iPhone, you put it onto night mode, which will actually make your screen go orange before bed. That way you're not looking at a bright white screen that's going to increase your cortisol. You can also do things like unplug your TV in your room before bed and not watch it before bed. And getting like an alarm clock that will actually wake you in the morning with like a bright light, which will help to stimulate your cortisol in the morning. So teaching your body that darkness means bedtime, light means it's time to wake up. And then in terms of like other things that you can do to fall asleep better, like magnesium is very relaxing. So for some people, there's that product at Sprouts or Natural Grocers called Natural Calm. And I actually really like that one. It's one of the few products that I'll say are really good at those stores. And what it does is it helps your body to get into that nice relaxation mode so that you can actually drift into sleep naturally without having to take any sleep aids. And that will help you to feel more relaxed during the next day, as well as have better bowel movements, which will eventually help your body to actually produce more melatonin, since a lot of our melatonin is made in our digestive tract, even though we used to think it was just made in the brain. So the more we work on digestion, which is why we start there, the more your sleep is going to get even better and better throughout the program. So falling asleep will become easy, especially if you're avoiding the sugar and the caffeine. And then staying asleep will get easier by changing the darkness in your room, as well as, again, getting rid of the caffeine, maybe having enough carbs with your good protein and fat with dinner to make sure that you have what you need to stay asleep and help those adrenals. And we can talk about that more because I know you guys are on the medical program, so we can talk about sleep on our consult as well if it's not repairing itself with just the foods. But almost all of our patients will say that after their detox, their sleep is like on point. So that will be to come, because we really want you getting 8 hours of sleep a night. There's so many studies showing that your memory is going to suffer the next day, your energy suffers the next day if you're not getting enough sleep, as does your creativity. So especially for students or business owners, if you can't be creative, it's really hard for you to do what you need to do in a day. So that sleep is super important. So do everything you can to minimize the light exposure before bed. Don't watch anything like action or scary right before bed, because you want to be able to sleep as well. Because if you don't get enough sleep, it's also tied to heart disease, diabetes, weight gain, sugar and carb cravings. So making sure that you prioritize that over everything else. Go ahead, Liz.
For the magnesium, is it okay to take it during the day, or is it better at night?
Yeah, so both.
Okay.
When I give people,
I take it in the morning just with all my vitamins. So is that okay?
totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I typically say a good dose for people of magnesium, since we have over 300 different processes in the body that require magnesium. Usually a good dose is 500 milligrams a day. So either you could do, like, one of my favorite products is Mag with SRT, which is through Jigsaw, that I could order you guys if you need it. But 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon would get you the 500 milligrams, and it helps to keep you nice and calm, helps with anxiety, helps with bowel movements, helps to sleep better at night. Or for people where it's primarily more of like a sleep issue and they're tossing and turning at night, they're the ones that do better with having that magnesium right before bed. Or if their bowels are really slow, that will help it to get going in the morning too. So you can totally play with it. But if it's more of a sleep issue, most of the time it's better right before bed.
Okay. Thank
really
you.
Good question. Any questions on that? Anything I can help you with sleep? We have about 6 minutes left. Or stress, any habits you're trying to form to help yourselves that I can help you with while we have this time. No? No questions? Perfect.
I sleep like a baby. So like I like required 10 hours. I'm like granny status. I'm like in bed by like 8 o'clock at night. I have to use the blackout curtains because now it's still like light out, but I need my sleep.
I agree. I'm the same way. I actually go to sleep at 8:30, 9:30 being my latest.
Yeah.
And I never thought that would be me. I mean, I see girls that they're like, oh my gosh. I used to go to bed at 1 in the morning every day, or like 3 on days that I was studying. And I thought it was ridiculous. And my parents went to bed before 9. And now I'm that person that goes to sleep at 8:30. And if it's 9:30, I'm like, oh my God, I have to, like, will I get my hours? Let's see, 9:30, 10:30, 11, like I'm counting, like I need my 8. Sometimes what I find though, is if you're sleeping too much, that can affect your energy during the next day too. And I've had people where they're like, I need to sleep 10 to 12 hours and they still feel kind of tired or sluggish, or they're not getting where they want to be. And when they start to change their morning routine and they're actually sleeping for 8, 9 hours, they actually feel way better during the day. And their energy is better and things like that too. So it's worth playing with, but I'm glad you sleep like a baby. That will definitely take you far. And I know there aren't people on this call right now with this issue, but just a little tip for you guys to know as you get older. You can also do something called incline bed therapy, and you'll see some more info on that in your portal. And that's where you actually raise the head of your bed so you're on an incline, and you just put bed risers underneath the posts of your bed and then kind of do something to support the middle beam. But that is amazing for circulation. It's really good if you're someone who wakes up a lot in the middle of the night to go pee. Really good for people with headaches, chronic pain. It just allows your body to actually filter and process and have that blood flow throughout the night instead of being stagnant. Because when you're like this, there's just no movement. Whereas this actually creates a little bit of like a pull and flow system.
So is that if you're a back sleeper, or
anything, doesn't matter.
Okay.
It takes a little while to get used to. I'm actually about to do this to my bed again anyway, because I find it incredibly beneficial for everyone, even though most people who do it are elderly. But I love when I do it. I feel like I sleep even deeper. I don't wake up to use the restroom. And I just feel better. So you can definitely try it out. It's easy.
Yeah, I have like the bed with the header and footer up.
Uh-huh.
But like I already have it. I haven't been using it like that.
Yeah, you could try with that. You just want to make sure that you're not like at like a bend. Like you don't want to be like this. You want your whole body to be. So if you do that with your bed where your whole body will be flat but on an incline, then that would be great. At first it's weird because you kind of slip a bit and you might have a headache the next day because your body doesn't know what's going on. But after a while, you feel really, really good.
Cool.
So there are all kinds of ways to kind of bump up your sleep a little bit more, but sleep is super important. So definitely make sure that your room is as black as possible. Get a sleep mask. That will really help you to sleep deeper and not wake up in the middle of the night like you are. So this week, we're removing the fun stuff. So gluten, fried foods, white potatoes. Sweet potatoes are totally fine. Fried foods are never good, so definitely just keep those out. There's no good substitute, but you can like saute things. I've never tried an air fryer, but I know people are loving air fryers. That's a good option too if you're just like, I really need something a little bit more crispy. And then you'll see lots of good options for gluten-free things. If you look at that elimination handout that I've given you, I talk about why we're eliminating these foods and what we're going to do about it and how to replace. This is usually a hard step for people. Liz, it sounds like you've already started that, so it'll be a little bit easier for you. But my biggest suggestions for removing gluten would be like, think of using lettuce wraps instead of bread. So even if you go out with your friends and you want to get a burger or you want to get, something like that, then get a lettuce wrap instead. And you can just buy butter leaf lettuce to do your own thing at home. I make tacos out of my butter leaf lettuce all the time. You can always ask for things gluten-free. Again, don't be scared to ask at a restaurant for them to make modifications, because they will usually gladly do it for you. But in the meantime, you can do things like gluten-free bread. I just want to warn you, if weight loss is a goal, that even gluten-free breads will not allow you to lose that weight. So doing more of just like the sweet potatoes and veggies and meat and avocados and nuts and things like that will go a long way. And then next week, we get to talk about food quality, which is a really fun topic. And that will also give us a lot of time to chat because it's a shorter topic. So come with questions. If you have questions on habit formation, that will be a really good time for us. Any last minute questions? We have just a couple seconds. Yeah, go ahead.
What shampoo and conditioner do you use again?
Awesome. I love Giovanni. Giovanni. It's a really good brand. They have really good stuff. And I like their frizz serum as well. You just need a little bit. It goes a really long way. Awesome. And then we'll talk more about products and things like that on the detox call too. But usually you can find some really good stuff in the health food stores. All right, ladies, we'll keep up the great work. Any other questions, send us an email. We'd be happy to help. Enjoy your weekends. Hopefully you learned some good stuff.